Hi, good morning, and welcome everyone. My name is Marina Pudre, and I am part of the advisory team here at Synergos. Thank you for joining us today for How Does Inner Work Improve Us in Our World? This discussion is the third event of our four-part virtual learning series, launching the Inner Work for Social Change project in partnership with the Fetzer Institute. Our session today is also part of Synergos Digital, a suite of virtual programming on topics that are critical to the world, especially in 2020 and beyond. All our offerings support Synergos' mission to build a world that is just, equitable, peaceful, and regenerative. We are grateful for your presence today and encourage you to share your thoughts and questions in the Zoom chat. Feel free to type hello and where you're tuning in from via the chat. And now, I have the pleasure of introducing my dear colleague who will be setting the stage for our panel discussion today, Catherine Ewell, the manager on the advisory team at Synergos and the lead on the Inner Work for Social Change project. Catherine, welcome.
Thanks so much, Marina, and hi to everyone. Welcome to our third session of our virtual learning series on Inner Work for Social Change. We're thrilled to see a lot of familiar faces joining us again, as well as some new members of our community. As Marina mentioned, my name is Catherine Ewell. I'm a manager on the Synergos advisory team, the social impact advisory arm of Synergos. Today, I will be your host and I'll be guiding us through our conversation. And before we get started, I wanted to just run us through the agenda briefly so you know what to expect for our time together. The format may feel familiar for those of you who have joined our prior sessions. We'll start off with a brief introduction around the project. Then we'll spend the majority of our time in an engaging dialogue around the concept of bridging leadership with three accomplished writers. Folks, today we have a diverse and impressive group of panelists joining us: a change agent and a storyteller, a doctor and health practitioner, and an agroeconomist. And then following this panel discussion, you'll have the opportunity to share some of your reflections with a smaller team in a breakout room. Finally, we'll wrap up with some closing remarks and share information about the final session and how to stay engaged. And just for a brief background on the project, Synergos and the Fetzer Institute began the project on Inner Work for Social Change in 2018 to demonstrate how inner work and bridging leadership can make social action towards a better world more effective. Through 6 commissioned case studies and in dialogue with thought leaders, development practitioners, and others, this project aims to spark a global conversation on how reflective practices can make social action more aware, more ethically attuned, and more sustainable. And today we'll focus on the connection between inner work and bridging leadership. Within this particular project, inner work is defined as any form of reflective practice that increases awareness of self, others, and the system in which complex problems arise. Inner work is core to bridging leadership, which is the capacity and will to build trust and tap the fullest contributions of diverse stakeholders, helping them to come together across divides to work in concert for the common good. And through an examination of the learnings from the case studies, today's panel discussion will explore the critical ingredients and enablers for bridging leadership across diverse contexts, geographies, and thematic areas. And as we've mentioned, to accompany the 6 case studies, our community and networks are engaging in discourse through this 4-part virtual learning series. This is the third of the 4-part series. In case you missed our last session on September 16th, here's a quick recap. We heard from the first 3 case writers who authored the Namibia, India, and South Africa case studies and explored the mutually reinforcing relationship between inner work and outer action. And what are some of the conditions that can allow individuals and collectives to move from a safe space to a brave space? Lastly, the panel discussion shed light on important lessons for this particular moment that we are all confronted with, and how to even begin to spark dialogue in contexts that carry a legacy of trauma, oppression, and mistrust. So to build on that session that we hosted on September 16th, today we will surface some of the key themes from the remaining 3 of the 6 total case studies. And with that, it would be an honor to introduce our moderator for today. Shirley Pendlebury is the case study advisor on the Inner Work for Social Change project and professor emeritus at the University of Cape Town. Shirley has really played a pivotal role in this project, from guiding the research and writing process of the cases to authoring a concept paper which proposes a universal definition of inner work, as well as a cross-case analysis to highlight the key themes of the case studies. Shirley, it's a pleasure to introduce you.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome all. It's wonderful to see people from India and Singapore, from Brazil and Namibia, from the United States and many other places. It gives me great pleasure to introduce these case studies and to moderate this session. Through this work, I've come to know a lot more about India and Brazil and Ethiopia, and a lot more about the agroeconomy, about public health. Education, not so much, because that's my own field. But this has really been an exciting time. In a moment, I'm going to ask the case writers to introduce themselves and to give you an in a nutshell view of each of their cases. You will have gathered that these cases are all about initiatives that addressed complex social problems and did so in a way that required collaboration and bridging leadership. And indeed, leadership is one of the important themes that comes out of the cross-case analysis. That's enough from me, and I'm going to hand over to the case writers. I could say to them who would start, but I think I'm going to point a finger at Renato. Would you be willing to start, Renato?
Yes, for sure. Shirley, thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you today. I'm talking from Florianópolis in southern Brazil, a very nice island, surrounded by lots of green and sea, etc. I'm a journalist by formation and a writer. Have a master in international relations by the Fletcher School of Diplomacy. But actually, I present myself as being a storyteller. I love getting to know stories and help other people to know these stories. And this story I'm talking about in the case studies is the story of a very nice, very impactful, very inspirational project developed in the northern part of Brazil, the state of Pará, to improve the public education in a state that's very big, the size of Peru, almost the size of the American state of Alaska, covered by the Amazon, very poor, but very rich. And so my idea, with my case studies, taking you to get in-depth knowledge of this very beautiful environment and to get to know a bit more of this beautiful people.
Thank you, Renato. Heidi, would you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Shirley. So, hi everyone. Good evening from Manila, Philippines. I'm deeply honored and grateful to be here with all of you. I'm Heidi Benaventura. I'm the doctor, as Catherine said. So I'm a medical doctor doing public health work, particularly in health systems development. So I'm currently involved and working in a private foundation, which is actually one of the main actors in the Philippine case. So the Philippine case is actually a story about how Zwillig Family Foundation or ZFF's prototyping experience of their health change model was scaled up into a national program with the Philippine Ministry of Health to really try to improve reforms to meet the Millennium Development Goals initially. And the partnership was in the form of a health leadership and governance program that capacitated government and ministry leaders on bridging leadership and how they are able to apply this approach in improving health systems and addressing the challenges in their respective areas. So it forms the foundation's prototyping experience that happened from 2008 to 2013 in 72 municipalities, and also the scale up in 2013 to 2018 that covered almost 700 local government units across the country. So it will basically tell you the story of the different leaders involved in the case, from ZFF's management and staff to the ministries, different leaders, and also the government leaders as well, and also the 11 academic institutions that was part of the program. So that's the case in a nutshell, Shirley. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say Heidi brings an insider's view to her case because she was herself one of the participants in the program that she researched for this case. I now want to introduce the person who is my teacher of economics. I came to this as an ignoramus, and through Leonie, I've learned about agriculture, about beer making, and about economics. Leonie, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Shirley, very much. And my name is Leonie Tardesse from Ethiopia. I'm an agricultural economist, as you said. I'm more specialized in development economics. I used to work as a researcher, academician, and then now more concentrated on consultancy services. My case study is on barley value chain. It is like a blink of transformation. It's building trust and collaboration in malting barley value chain. So for some of you who are not very familiar with malt barley, this is a kind of barley used for making beer or whiskey and so on. I say the title, A Blink of Transformation. In a sense, it's a quick, fast change, but not dramatic changes. As a case study, actually bases on the Synergos intervention in capacity building, particularly focusing on bridging leadership, which was exercised with a number of stakeholders. The Ministry of Agriculture, number one, agricultural transformation agencies, the research institutions, cooperatives, farmers unions, and including farmers also, the small farmers. So a number of institutions were there, and the project ran between 2011 to 2017, and I conducted the study just last year, 2019. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leonie. And Leonie mentioned the title of his case study.
Yes.
What is astonishing about all three of these case studies is their extremely evocative titles. From Brazil, you have a title about jumping into the waves of the river. From Ethiopia, a blink of transformation. And from the Philippines, bridging inner and systems governance. I'd be interested to know from each of you, what inspired those titles? What themes from your case studies do you think the titles spotlight? I wonder who'd like to go first.
Yeah, thank you, Shirley. That's a very interesting question. You know, the big agenda of the government is economic transformation, particularly agricultural transformation. This was a big agenda, and everybody was in doubt whether this can be achieved or not. So what kind of a miracle of intervention could be done really to make agricultural transformation realistic? That was big agenda in the nation, and everybody was in doubt. So with a simple but very powerful intervention, which nobody has expected, this bridging leadership, which has a big element of inner work in it, then we could see in a short moment, focusing on a value chain of multi-barley, because this crop is very essential because it is a food crop as well as an industrial crop. So the intervention, bringing stakeholders together, harmonizing the relationship, which was never there before. Then we could see, a bright future in a short moment that transformation can happen. So this gave a clue and a possibility and a learning forum for the government how transformation can happen. That's what I.
Thank you, Bayeni. When I first read your title, I thought, does Bayeni mean a wink or a blink? And as I said to him, a wink, you often speak about quick as a wink. So you're thinking about how quickly the transformation happened. And a blink suggests to me just a little bit, now you see it, now you don't. And he said he meant both, that it happened very quickly, but it was only the start and there was still work to be done. And it's really exciting work.
Yeah. I said a blink because it still depends on so many factors to sustainably transform the sector.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. Very, very illuminating metaphor.
Thank you very much.
Now I'm looking, who are we going to go? Heidi, would you like to tell us about yours?
Yeah, Shirley. So from Bayeni's economic transformation, I'll now focus on health system transformation. So I titled the Philippine case, Bridging Inner and System Governance. And I remember this quote by Bill O'Brien that was often used in the training activities in the program. It says that the success of an intervention depends on the interior condition of the intervener. And this quote somehow captures one of the core messages of the case, that the success of one's action as leader or change agent is not just on the how and the what, but really on the inner place that they operate from. And this was actually presented by the different experiences of the leaders in the case. That both government and political leaders were equipped to practice bridging leadership that was anchored on a very well-designed health change model. And bridging leadership, as Bayeni said, was very heavy on ownership, personal ownership of the leaders. And this ownership was not just about an awareness of the challenges and situations that they were facing, but really on one's purpose and values. And the connection of personal mastery of the leaders in driving meaningful reforms in their system really stood out, added more the unique context that it was used in political leadership. Because as we know, inner work in politics is somewhat an unconventional statement put together. So the concept of bridging inner and system governance is really conveying that connecting or bridging one's ability to lead or govern the self is very important in facilitating a more purposive and responsive action to really impact system changes. And in the case, it resulted to really drastic changes in maternal deaths and other health system outcomes.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, again, a very inspiring title. And I think it articulates with so much work that is now also being done in the field of sustainability science, where there's an argument that sustainability for the earth, for the planet, can't work unless we also pay attention to our inner landscapes. And landscapes bring me jumping into the river with you, Renato. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned before, the state of Pará is covered by a network of 20,000 kilometers of rivers, and rivers are actually the real world. No, most of the cities depending on the rivers, and it's very interesting when you go there. You see how children used to play with the rivers. You know, they have a specific word that means the moment when they jump in the river when the ship pass by, so they can, you know, try to surprise the small waves. So I thought immediately, I used this image to try to capture the challenge of putting different actors of society in a multi-sector partnership to try to surpass some challenges. First of all, the challenge of the lacking of trust among them. I mean, we're talking about government, corporations, civil society, teachers, parents, etc. They are not used to work together, especially in this place. So there is a challenge to surpass the lack of, you know, challenge, and then the challenge of developing a complex solution for a very complex problem, which is the low level of education. And I could easily see this image of people holding hands, trying to understand what's the problem was, see the wave is coming, try to figure out, okay, this is the moment to jump or not, trying to understand, okay, let's jump now to these waves of, you know, low education level, try to understand how one supports each other in a case like that, and how to surpass the difficulty that will be surely coming with an initiative like that. So that's why the relationship between children trying to surpass a very specific situation could easily be transplanted to this political challenge of putting different actors working together to solve a collective problem that affects all of them. And I think this is the story that I try to tell in my case study.
And it's such a richly told story about how people come together to try to face that challenge that is a failing education system. And also a story about how education itself enables children to jump into the waves, to ride the challenges that life will bring them, especially in an unequal society. Yeah. You know, all the case studies, but particularly these three, contain very powerful stories about leadership. As I mentioned in my introduction, leadership is one of the central themes that comes out in the cross-case analysis. I've thought about it as changing to lead and leading for change. I wonder if you could tell us something about the amazing leaders in your stories. What was their source of leadership? How were they able to lead from within? What was their style? So, and what we're really interested in here is the relationship between the person and the role of leader. Personal transformation, the sources of inspiration. I wonder, Heidi, would you begin?
Yeah, I can start, Shirley. So I remember two memorable characters or actors in the case, and one of them I think is with us now. So I remember one of the government leaders in the name of Miss Badge, who was one of the ministry's program implementers in the program. And when I asked her what was the most important impact of the whole bridging leadership experience to her, she answered hope. And to her, hope is important, especially working in bureaucracy. So she shared in her 18 years experience in government service, doing collaborative work with local government and also other sectors amidst all office politics, inactive leaders, and really the traditional approaches that brought about the gaps in the system. She was often brought to a point that she questioned herself if the work was still worth it. But being exposed in the program itself, it helped her to reconnect why she's doing what she's doing in the first place, and really have that hopeful mindset of seeing the good in people and really pushing through even if the work becomes difficult. She was validated that the place that she wants to live in is really of service. So even with all the challenges with her, she was able to engage different leaders to co-create innovations in the region, which is one of the most geographically isolated islands in the country. And the regular inner checks in the program really provided her a strong anchor to still push through in any circumstance. And similarly, one health worker as well, Dr. Nona, also shared that realization that the reflections actually enabled her to connect to her purpose and her values, and even had this realization that her faith contributed to who she is and why she's doing what she's doing. She related her service to actually her ministry and service to God, and that influenced her how she was able to change the way she interacts or engage her staff, her different municipal leaders. So all in all, the stories of these two leaders somehow showed how leading from within was able to facilitate system changes, because they recognize that the person within the leader, whoever he or she is, the values that come with it, is really integral in leading change. So that's from my end, Shirley.
Thank you, Heidi. I'm looking at my colleague Renata and Biene and wondering, Biene, would you like to go next? Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Whenever I remember a person really converted because of the training on inner work, bridging leadership. I always remember His Excellency Mr. Usman Suru Sirai. There are a lot of people actually who can witness how much they change it, but this guy is very special to me, so I want to refer to him. He is a commissioner in Federal Cooperative Agency, and this agency is responsible to organize people in business enterprises or for different services, and particularly they focus on organizing farmers into cooperatives and the unions. So Mr. Usman was in a chaotic organizational environment, and his organization was corruptive, and then it was full of problems. Actually, he was at risk initially. But fortunately, he joined training organized by Synergos on bridging leadership. And when he tells us, he said, I really just found myself and start to ask, what am I doing? How am I leading the organization? What's wrong with me? And then finally, he just witnessed his mind completely changed. So from more of dictatorial leadership to more participatory leadership type. And he said, I started to listen to my subordinate staffs, then listen to other sectors, then understand their problems, share their issues, their values, then problems, and so on. Then after that, the organizational environment completely changed. Even he went beyond, understanding people to changing the organizational setup, the working arrangements, the working environment, and so on. And he said, okay, my organization is redeemed from being disappearing because of the opportunity I got from Synergos on bridging leadership. So this guy was able to harmonize his working environment, and he made it more professional and friendly environment, actually. And then their relationship with other sectors that I said, with research organizations, with unions, with manufacturers, completely harmonized, and then it got much better. So the organization became very effective. This guy is now a kind of a model person now, interviewed by different organizations and to share experience and so on today. Thank you.
Yeah, they're wonderful stories of the way in which he uses terminology which might sound a little strange. He talks about the process as a witch doctor. Now that sounds odd, but I think he was recognizing the profound and almost magical change that occurred to him as he became a listener, as he was willing to hear from other stakeholders so that they worked together. I know Peggy's very interested to hear more about trust building, but our next question will lead to that. Renato, you have some leadership stories to share with us.
Yes, I do have. I think the beautiful thing about the case studies is that we are able to get in touch with different styles and types of exercising bridge leadership. In my case, I could bring two examples. One example at a more higher level, and another in more local, in a local level. I'd like to bring about the story about Wanda Engel-Aduan, who was by that time the project was developed in Brazil, the Synergos Brazil executive director. She has developed throughout her entire career incredible bunch of knowledge about developing, implementing multi-sector partnerships. So she was capital, to put together all the key elements at high level to develop and to implement the project, the Pact for Education in Pará, and especially together with the Synergos team to locate what would be the emergent bridge leader that should be supported to become real bridge leader throughout the process. And I think that's very important. And she mentioned this a lot of time. Okay, one of the challenges is really locate these people and helping them to flourish. And one example I could bring of the result of this effort is a story of a businessman, Marcos Ancaner, who was able to bring to the partnership around 35 other businessmen from his own personal network to participate in this project. And I was talking to him at his desk, and he was telling me, okay, when I heard about the Pact for Education in Pará, I thought with myself, how me as a businessman who operates in a field that's not related to education at all, how I can really help beyond giving some money or acting as a philanthropist, something like that. So I decided to stop a while and to study about education, to understand why education is so important. And as long I read a lot, I participated in some course, etc. And as long as I learned about the impact of education, the impact that education can have in the society, I became in love of the issue. And right now, I am a totally defender of education as the best way to really improve society. And it's just fun because I could perceive when he was talking to me the epiphany moment or the aha moment he had, and in the end he is saying, okay, even if this pact doesn't continue at low state level, I will fight for it to continue to be implemented at local level at the city, because I can see how the city is changing, because we are really investing collectively in education. And I think this is a clearly sign of personal transformation for a person who never thought about education. intellectually, he knew about the importance of education, but now he was having an emotional connection to this, which also impacted in the way he was operating as a leader. And I think this is just one of the examples I was able to raise from my conversation with other actors in this process.
Yeah. So Renato's case study is really interesting because it shows how the experience of working collaboratively in multi-sectoral partnerships can itself result in personal transformation. So he has several stories of business people, corporates, who felt that they had nothing to add to education because they were not educationists. And yet they came out of the experience with a changed perception of themselves, a changed perception of education. And there's one person you quote in your case study, Renato, who says she was somebody who worked in education, but she moved through this from being somebody who was always concerned only with her own projects and her own commitments, to coming to understand that this was a question of we, of our projects. So she moved from an individual conception to a much more collective understanding. And it seems to me that is a profound personal change. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just to add a bit on this, because it was very clear for me when she said, okay, in my entire life, professional life, in the Secretary of Education, I have never thought about working with civil society organizations in the field of education, because education is my field, right? But now I see that impossible to improve education without working collectively with others outside my own surroundings. And I think this is a great transformation.
Yeah. Let me pause a moment to say that I've noticed a lot of people have just joined us. You're very welcome. We're sorry you've missed part of the discussion, but it's great to see you. And I especially want to welcome our fellow case writer, Morabo, who's joined us from Lesotho. Greetings. Good. I know that at this time, people in the United States and perhaps around the world have mourned the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and celebrated her life and contribution to justice. She once said, "Fight for the things you care about, but do it in a way that leads others to join you." Now, what I'm interested to know from the three of you is, how did the leaders lead others to join them in a movement, in a partnership, for something that was really worth fighting for? How did they motivate people? How did they build the trust that is necessary when you have groups who've never worked together, in countries where there are long collective memories of suspicion and distrust? What can you give us some examples?
I can jump in if you want.
Oh, you jumped in. Great.
Jump into this. Yes, to answer to that, I'd like to give voice to another leader that I was happy to get to know in this process. It's the Secretary of Education of a very small city located about 400 kilometers from Belém, the capital of the state of Pará. His name is Aurelino Gomes, and he was a local bridge leader that was, together with others, was able to implement the pact in an incredible, impactful way in the city. This small, very poor city is for many years now, after the pact, having the best ranking in terms of public education in the state of Pará, surpassing even the state level. And I asked him, okay, what's the secret of involving so many different people, from religions, from leaders, from businessmen, from teachers and parents and businessmen, etc. He told me, okay, that's a good question. I have thought about that, but I think that there are some key elements to that. One element is really developing a environment of trust. And in order to do that, bridge leader must be able to be open to hear the multiple views and to listen to different parties and different voices without trying to impose his or her vision. This is one thing. The other thing that referred to me is that, of course, bridge leader must be open to understand that there are individualities, expectations at the moment, and the moment of life of every actor is different. So we need to understand that and to respect that. The fourth element is that, okay, but a bridge leader must have the courage to actively participate and to call others to participate, you know? And that must be complemented with the fifth item is to be transparent and honest about the real capacity of achieving what's being proposed and the role that each one must participate. And then the last issue that he brought to me is that to reinforce this environment of trust, the promises must be kept and the contributions must be publicly recognized. So people see themselves reflected on what was doing. So I think these words are beautiful. I wouldn't say better than him because he was implementing that very successfully.
Leonie.
Yeah, I should follow Renato actually. There are a lot of similarities here with us too. You know, people will follow you, you know, after they well understand you, who you are. So that means, you see, building trust. As we said earlier, you also said, Catherine also said before, now this trust building comes from personal transformation, and which again comes from inner work. Then not only trust building, then to build up on trust building, then one has to be committed. Okay, you see, show pragmatically, you know, what is to be done and how to do it. You see. Sometimes, you know, personal transformation alone is not enough. And what is transformation? Maybe attitudinal change of the mindset and so on. But practically, how that leader is doing things on the ground. So commitment and to be pragmatic is very important. And in this regard, I should mention the Agricultural Transformation Agency. Who brought together different stakeholders, which was, as I said before, was very difficult. And we had a problem of working together among Ministry of Agriculture, research institutions, cooperatives, unions, manufacturers, but who are very important for sector development. And they independently plan and then independently deploy their staffs, and then no one was understanding the other, no one. So there was practically duplication of efforts, duplication of resources actually. So with the help of Synergos, ATA able to now harmonize the working environment and bringing the collaborative effort of these all stakeholders. And that happened, and at the same time, you see, then we find, which was which uncommon before, whereby the manufacturers are now getting closer to the farmers and supporting with provision of credit, provision of technologies, and where researchers also come closer to the farmers and to work together, and many others did like that. Then, you know, it's very interesting to see farmers following them, you know. One of the issue was farmers trusted actually how these organizations are supporting them, and then, you know, one of the intervention was to create market linkage, and then for the first time farmers start to work on contractual farming business. This has never happened in our case actually. So there happened a direct linkage between farmers and then manufacturers, you know. Because now farmers are able to produce surplus production in excess of their food, then now supply to the market. Then market was the problem before. Now then the manufacturers create the market. So the relationship between the manufacturers, the beer breweries, and the farmers is now very close. Then there is no market risks as such. That was very interesting. The other thing which also followed with farmers is what they call it cluster farming. Farmers used to farm their pieces of land independently before, and that remained them with traditional farming system. Now, trusting the market system, trusting now that different organizations are around them to help, they were easily convinced to bring the land together, particularly those who are neighborhood, then now to deploy modern farming system, using tractor, combined harvesters, and so on. So further, this mechanization, that's what I said, in the brink of transformation. So this all emerged from trust building. And that happened because of improvement in the leadership quality of the organizations and their personal transformation. Thank you.
Leonie, we have too little time to go into this in depth, but I will say that Leonie's case study shows very clearly that building trustworthy practices and building a culture of trust is as important as building the bonds of trust. So in his case, things like stakeholder forums, clear communication, contracts, all help to build trustworthy practices. But it's time now to go to Heidi, because we're about to run out of time. No, we're not, Heidi.
Yeah, so I think I'd like to build on to what Bayeni and Renato shared in terms of community action, having a visionary leader, and really the importance of trust building. So in the case of the Philippines, what's unique in the Philippine health system is it's a decentralized system. And as we know, the authority and power to manage the health programs and systems is given to the local government leaders. And with that, we know how political directions and political influences are really impactful in terms of health system performance and outcomes. And we can surmise how the power dynamics between the leaders and the people are given this structure. But what was beautiful with the case was the political leaders who were able to embrace and really practice bridging leadership was able to present an alternative form of how they do politics. And it became more of like a really facilitative, participatory, and empowering approach. I remember the story of a governor, Governor Joben, who was exposed to a maternal death case in his province. And his immersion, he actually visited one of the remote villages in his province and talked to the husband of the maternal death. And after their conversation, he traversed the roads that the family traveled during that night, and also he was able to visit the health facilities that the family visited and those that rejected them because there were no doctors. He was able to talk to the health workers. He was able to talk to the community members, and hearing from the community that they themselves don't know how to access the services and that they were turned down because they were poor. The overall experience was somehow revolutionary in terms of how the governor sees his leadership in his province, because originally he was confident that he was doing good because he was investing very much in his hospitals. But after that experience, the feedback, the interaction, and really understanding the system and his province, he was led to a clearer vision of what he wants to happen. And he saw the importance of listening, of facilitating dialogues with his constituents towards co-created action. And similarly, this experience of a mayor in a remote town in the Philippines, Mayor Sam, it was somehow similar in terms of when he realized that the vision they created during the training was too big for them to do it alone. They in one of their deep dive activities, it's like an immersion sensing activity where they talk to their stakeholders. They organized this community conversation where they invited different households, and in that consultative activity that eventually transformed into in a community dialogue, Mayor Sam, if I can quote him directly, he said, "We went there ready to listen to their issues and needs. We recognize that each person can contribute to the change. We approach it by facilitating a conversation to come up with a shared understanding of the issues and challenges instead of just coming up with a wish list of interventions." So, with those stories of these political leaders, we can say that they were able to understand the need to have personal connections with others and really come from a genuine place of understanding of what they need and what is a responsive approach to their challenges. They were able to realize that listening, facilitating dialogue, creating that space for conversations is really foundational in building trust and influencing others for action.
Thank you, Heidi. We have probably less than 1 minute left. So I'm going to ask the case writers, in one sentence, can you tell us either about an aha moment? What was the aha moment in your case? Or you can do this in a related way. What's the one powerful lesson from your case that you think could be applied elsewhere? So you have less than a minute each, about 30 seconds each.
I should take the first chance.
Good, go.
Yeah, this is just my experience from the case study. I found investing in inner work and bridging leadership is most effective in social and economic transformation, but probably is the cheapest. Maybe if I had two, maybe
That's it. That's your one lesson. Yes.
yeah,
And JT has just said, and the Synergos session in 2 weeks' time, we'll try to look exactly at how you make that case to your organizations. Who's going to go next?
Yeah.
Renata?
You can go next.
Okay, so let me jump in this. I think my aha moment was when I was in Belém talking to people at the state level, and I traveled for 400 kilometers to the small city, and I was able to see how all this great idea was implemented at very local level with people that normally are not receiving much support from other government levels. I saw that how turning this idea into a public policy to which every sector of society was actively participating was fundamental to see that this idea is feasible and can be very, very, this idea of boot sector partnership is feasible and can be very impactful. That was really a aha moment, and that gives me the hope that such initiatives can be implemented everywhere as long as people get really involved.
Thank you, Renata. Last word.
Yeah, so I think my aha moment, or probably the lesson from the case, I'd like to quote this academic trainer in the program, Dr. Ryan, and what he said, I also affirm as being one who was able to complete and finish the program. So he said that the debates have been whether the drivers to system or effective social changes is either personal or systems oriented. It was never an either or, it was both and together.
Thank you, Heidi. In a moment, we're going to be moved into breakout rooms where we would like you, the participants, to share your wisdom, to connect with one another, and to reflect on what you've heard in relation to your own experiences. Once you move into breakout rooms, we'll ask you to have a discussion around just one guiding question. I'm going to say the question out loud, but the facilitators in the breakout rooms also have a copy of it. Would you share with us a moment in your life when you have either seen or felt the impact of bridging leadership? Discuss well. We'll see you in about 25 minutes.
Spoke about the experience with bridging leaders, and very quickly build trust, convene, empathy, transparent, ability to be vulnerable, passion, heart-centered, connected, love, and joy.
Wow, great. Yeah. Marlene, you look as though you'd like to share.
I wanted to say Len took our list, but what I would include is also around bridging divides. My group shared a lot around communities that they've worked in and how to immerse yourself into the experiences of the local people.
Yeah, great.
Passion to the issues. And also around co-ownership. Co-ownership and co-creation is very important in the space as well. And yeah, some great tools and ideas were shared as well, and information and where we can get it. So a really nice conversation.
Good.
Yeah,
we
thanks.
hope you'll send us some notes, Marlene.
Yeah.
Grace, what about you?
Let's see. I think that one of the biggest things that we were feeling as we started our group was that some of us might have been a little bit discombobulated based on some of the events last night at the US presidential debate.
Oh,
and so
yes.
So that felt like a point for us to kind of focus on both impacts of bridging leadership that we'd seen, but also areas where we needed bridging leadership desperately, and where it felt difficult to watch. So I know a few people have said things like an assault on your senses. So that was definitely something that kind of kept with us. So I'll maybe leave it at that.
Yes. Thank you. Chonlin?
We had a wonderful conversation, and I think a couple of, and just to add to some of the rich material that others have already shared from their breakout rooms, we had, there was a theme that emerged about diffused leadership, and as opposed to more traditional hierarchical leadership, and the kind of joy that people bring in such a more collaborative leadership style where everyone is contributing without necessarily kind of a traditional top-down sort of situation. And we also talked about the value of seeing from new and different perspectives. And that manifested whether in through kind of hearing about and seeing stories from other people's experiences, to using theater as a vehicle for kind of bringing in and living out in a different way. And also some kind of interesting experiments in what it's like to operate differently when you're stripped of your more kind of traditional identities and how you are normally seen in society. The kind of different ways you might be able to operate in the world when you don't have those kind of preconceptions being held by you or put upon you. We had a wonderful conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. Swati, did you moderate a group?
I did, and we also had a great discussion. Some of the themes that emerged were, actually, first of all, the geographic spread of the examples were just incredible. This is quite a global topic. Some of the themes that emerged were some unusual leaders emerging in building trust, and that with a lot of effort, there is sometimes a turning point where a situation turns around. And after that, there may be also continual effort needed. And we talked about resilience, the collective resilience of a people, especially during COVID. And there was a beautiful example of New York City, which is home to me and several of our audience members as well. And I know many at Synergos, that back in March, April, and May, when New York was the epicenter of COVID, there was this collective strength and collective resilience of the people here. When COVID was at its highest in New York, resiliency was at its highest in New York. And it was such a beautiful example to illustrate the power of bridging leadership in someone's life going through a crisis. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your examples. They've been so inspiring.
Thank you. I'm noticing interesting things coming in the chat line, but let's move on. Kate, would you like to report?
We had a wonderful discussion as well, and 3 points I'll highlight. We talked about the need for love, especially at times when you are most ardently disagreeing with someone, the need to lead with love, the power of power, if you will, and how it takes different forms, either collectively or the power that we have to give our power or step aside, and what that looks like and how that's essential. And the final piece we spent a big chunk of time on is the nature and what it means to actually connect, and how that is so essential for our own practice and grounding and our ability to do and be and practice and be centered. So, and then Lori shared our wonderful article about something called awe walks and how we really should try to find awe in our everyday lives. So Lori, you should share that article with the wider group if you are comfortable doing so.
Yes, please. Yeah. Ialu, if I've pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you very much for pronouncing it like that. It's quite a difficult one. We had actually a very interesting discussion in our group. Most of our themes have already been highlighted by the colleagues from other groups. I just want to share maybe perhaps 3 points that came out. One of the thing that was shared is setting aside your differences for a common good. And another thing that came up is that bridging leadership, it's a cross-cutting issue that can be either in profit, non-profit, private, government, or whatever sphere that you feel where there is leadership of any kind. It literally, it fits and it works. And I think the other one, it's when you divide yourself and your doing. So basically the self of your inner self and what you are doing out there should speak to each other. Don't be a human being with the feelings and with all that comes with it. And when you are doing something, it's actually destroying other people. So there should be that link of the doing and knowing yourself that should link in order to truly know what is out there.
Wow. It's an immensely rich set of discussions from all the groups. I hope we're keeping notes. They're threads for further conversations. I'm going to ask Catherine, whom I believe is the last of the moderators to speak, to tell us about her group and then perhaps move into wrap up. Would you do that, Catherine?
I would love to. Thank you so much, Shirley, and thanks for your wonderful facilitation. I'm always taken aback by how you're able to invite people into a conversation. So our group actually had a really interesting conversation, from talking about community projects in Brazil to gang and police violence in LA to indigenous communities in the US. I think one of the biggest interwoven themes was, how do you start to recognize the humanity in others, especially when we're so attuned to having us versus them mentalities. So one of the ways that people were able to talk about this sense of recognizing others' humanity was to get into experiences that get you outside of your normal day-to-day, to walk in another's shoes and to build that sense of empathy. So that was one of, I think a lot of the other teams talked about some of the themes that resonated with us, but that was one additional one I wanted to throw in there. And with that, I know, excuse me, I know we're a bit over time, so I wanted to just wrap up and invite you all to the last session that we have planned. This has been an incredible journey, and I've loved seeing people showing up time and time again. And it's been just such a wonderful experience getting to talk with you more intimately in breakout rooms. I wanted to first, though, thank Bayene, Heidi, and Renato. They did such an incredible job sharing the stories from their case studies. It's lovely seeing these stories really come to life. So thank you so much for sharing. And then Shirley, again, you're such a wonderful, heartfelt facilitator. Just loved it. It brought me so much joy hearing you facilitate this conversation. And then again, thank you to everyone who participated. I'm always astounded by people's ability to be vulnerable and share personal stories in these breakout rooms. And that's really what is creating our community and our community of practice. So thank you. Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for going out on a limb and being vulnerable with us. And we really hope to see you in our last session, which will take place on October 14th at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time.